You ever have one of those moments that knocks the air clean out of your chest? Not because someone hit you, but because it finally sinks in that no one was ever really on your side? That moment for me happened in Reno, Nevada, the day I got a call from the police department asking if I'd be willing to come in for some questions related to a hit and run involving a silver Maserati. I laughed, at first, because I thought they had the wrong guy. I drive a '09 Honda Civic with a cracked bumper and a passenger window that won't roll down. But then the officer on the line said something that made my blood freeze. They found a baseball bat in the trunk, with my name burned into the handle. I didn't even ask how they got my name. I already knew. My brother Eric. Golden boy Eric. The same Eric who'd crashed that very Maserati a week before. The car our parents bought him for graduating with a business degree he barely earned. The same Eric who hadn't worked a real job in his life, but somehow always ended up with the best of everything. And now, apparently, he decided to drag me down with him. Here's the part that really messed me up. I just cut ties with my family 2 months before, after discovering they'd left me out of their will. Every penny, every asset, everything was going to Eric. And I was the one who'd paid their mortgage for 5 years straight. Fixed the plumbing, paid for the grocery deliveries, took their calls at midnight. I was the good son, the invisible one, and now they were framing me for insurance fraud. I sat there in my living room in North Reno, just staring at the wall while the officer's voice faded into static in my head. My hands didn't even shake. I didn't get mad. I didn't scream. I just said I'd come in, because if they were going to try to bury me, they'd have to do it face to face. I didn't hire a lawyer right away. That's probably the first thing I should have done, but I needed to see how deep this went. I walked into that station wearing the same faded flannel I'd worn fixing my parents' leaky roof 2 summers ago. Still had a smear of caulk on the sleeve. Like a scar from time, I still believed I mattered to them. They sat me down in a quiet room with soft lights and a coffee I didn't drink. The questions started basic. Did I know the car? Had I been near the strip mall on Plum Lane the night before? Did I own a bat? I answered everything. Calm. Straight. No fideting. I knew what this was. It was a test, not just of facts, but of character. They were waiting for me to crack, to show a flicker of guilt. But I've been building my tolerance for disappointment since I was a kid. I wasn't about to fall apart now. Then the officer, younger guy, maybe 35, slid a photo across the table. It was grainy, but clear enough. A figure stepping out of the Maserati. My brother's build. My brother's haircut. Wearing the custom varsity jacket he never stopped bragging about. The one our parents paid for senior year of high school. Only problem was the bat was there too, propped in the back seat like a passenger. Same bat he stole out of my garage the day after I told them I was done helping. I looked at that photo a long time. Not because I was shocked, I wasn't. I was mourning. Mourning the version of myself that still held onto the hope they'd never stoop this low. But here we were. The officer saw my silence and said something about understanding family tensions. That if there was anything I hadn't told them, now was the time. So I told him, not everything, just enough. Enough for him to realize that this wasn't some accident or miscommunication. This was a setup. My brother had crashed the car during a joyride, panicked, then handed the whole mess over to me like it was mine to clean up. I remember the officer nodding slowly, then leaving the room. I sat there in that stale air, staring at the two-way mirror, wondering if they could see what I'd just seen in myself. Not fear, not anger, but finality. I was done playing the good son. 3 days later, the footage surfaced. Not just one clip, several. Security cams from a liquor store across the street. A parking lot feed from a laundromat. Even a grainy dash cam from an old guy's pickup that happened to be parked facing the alley. And every single angle told the same story. Eric behind the wheel, peeling out of the lot like he was auditioning for a Fast and Furious sequel. Then the crash. A crunch of metal, sparks. Him stumbling out of the Maserati like a drunk prom king, opening the back door and grabbing the bat. My bat. He didn't just plant it, he staged it. Wiped it down with a rag, tossed it dramatically on the pavement, then jogged off screen like it was some B-grade heist movie. Only thing missing was the soundtrack. By the time the detective called me back, his voice was different. Less suspicious, more careful. Like maybe now he saw what I'd known all along. I wasn't the villain. I was the mark. That night, I sat in my apartment, small place off Wedekind Road, barely room for anything but a couch and a box fan, and stared at the charging cable on the floor for what felt like an hour. I kept thinking about how far you have to fall, morally, to try and bury your own brother. And then I remembered the last thing our mom said to me before I cut ties. She said I didn't need the inheritance because I had a stable life. Like stability was a crime. Like having my crap together somehow meant I should be okay with being discarded. Well, now they were all watching the ground give out beneath them, and I wasn't the safety net anymore. I pressed charges the next morning. Fraud, false report, attempted frame job. It was like watching dominoes fall, slow but certain. Eric tried to play dumb at first, big surprise, then cried. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that he panicked and didn't know what else to do. And our parents? Radio silence. Not even a text. Guess they thought if they didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't be real. 2 weeks later, Eric was officially charged. The look on his face during the arraignment. I wish I could say it gave me satisfaction, but all I really felt was hollow. Like watching someone set fire to a house you used to live in. One you already moved out of but still remembered every creak in the floorboards. He pled not guilty. Of course he did. Claimed he had no idea how the bat got there. Suggested maybe someone else planted it to frame him. That's when I knew. Even cornered, Eric would never admit anything. He'd rather drag everyone down into the mud than own what he did. That was his gift. Or maybe his curse. My lawyer asked if I wanted to go after our parents too. For conspiring, for obstruction, something. I said no. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because I was tired. You can only swing at ghosts for so long before you realize the only person getting bruised is you. Instead, I moved, packed up my things, left Reno, and headed south, landed in Flagstaff, Arizona. Quieter, fewer memories. Found a small rental near Switzer Canyon, the kind of place where the coffee shop guy actually remembers your order and the air smells like pine and rain. Got a job doing what I used to love before everything turned awry. Repairing guitars, tuning strings, fixing fretboards. Something about that work, slow, precise, quiet, helped stitch me back together, piece by piece. About 6 months after the charges, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. It was my mother. Her voice was thin, brittle. She said things were bad, that Eric was draining what little money they had left, that they might lose the house, that they hadn't heard from him in weeks and needed help. I listened, and then I said no. Not angrily, not with bitterness, just quietly, firmly. No. She started to cry, but I didn't. I didn't feel cold. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clean. For the first time in my life, I chose me. I wish I could tell you that saying no was some grand moment of liberation, like in the movies when the music swells and the hero walks off into the sunset, free and triumphant. But real life doesn't do dramatic exits. It just keeps going. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, the Arizona dusk bleeding in through the blinds. My hands weren't shaking. My chest didn't ache. I just felt still, like the chaos had finally burned itself out, and what was left was silence. And in that silence, I thought about the bat. I kept it, the one Eric planted, the one with my name burned into the grip, Jake in all caps, carved with a soldering iron when I was 16. I found it at the bottom of the evidence box when the detective returned my things after the case was dismissed. I probably should have thrown it out, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned it against the wall of my new place right by the door. Not as some kind of trophy. It wasn't a reminder of strength. It was a warning. A reminder of what happens when you keep carrying weight that isn't yours. You start a break. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it shows up wrapped in pleasantries, in familiar smiles, in the kind of love that asks you to bleed a little more, just to keep the peace. That's what I lived with for years. Being the glue, the fixer, the one who never asked for much and got even less. Because I thought that's what it meant to be a good son, a good man. But here's the thing. When someone shows you, again and again, that they'll sacrifice you to keep their illusions intact, it's not loyalty to stay. It's self-destruction. And I was done destroying myself for people who wouldn't flinch watching me drown. I got a letter a month later. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My father's. Rigid. Angular. Like every word was carved instead of written. Inside were 2 pages, both sides filled. No apology. Just a long, winding attempt to explain how hard parenting had been. How Eric had always needed more. How they never intended to hurt me. How they thought I was strong enough to handle being left out. Strong enough. Like abandonment was a compliment. He ended the letter with a request. If things got worse, would I consider helping out? Not for Eric. We know he's made his bed. But for them. Because you're the only one we can count on. That line stuck with me. Not because it was true, but because I used to be the one they could count on. Until they counted me out. I didn't write back. I took the letter, folded it once, and slid it into the back of the drawer where I keep receipts and spare guitar strings. Not out of malice. Just because it didn't deserve more than that. Sometimes people don't apologize. They just circle you, hoping you'll forget what they did long enough to come close again. But I hadn't forgotten. In Flagstaff, I built a small life. Nothing flashy. Mornings fixing instruments in a quiet workshop. Afternoons hiking the trails just outside town. Weekends helping at a local music co-op where teenagers came to borrow gear and try not to fall apart. One of the kids, Diego, reminded me of myself at that age. Quiet, watching everything. Asked too few questions because he'd learned adults don't usually care about the answers. He stayed late one Saturday, pretending to clean just to keep talking. Asked me why I always looked tired, even when I smiled. I told him the truth. Some weights you carry long after you put them down. The news about my parents came on a Wednesday. I was restringing an old Fender when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was their neighbor, Mrs. Langley. Said she'd found my mom sitting on the front steps crying, clutching a stack of overdue bills and a foreclosure notice. My dad was inside, too proud or too ashamed to come out. They'd finally run out of money. And still, I didn't call back. I wish I could say that made me feel powerful, that it was some victorious act of justice. But all I really felt was distance. Like I was standing on one side of a canyon that used to be a hallway, watching people I used to know go under, unable and unwilling to cross. Some part of me still wanted to help. Not because they deserved it, but because I used to measure my worth in sacrifice. But I'd done enough sacrificing. That night, I went for a walk. Took the trail behind Buffalo Park that loops past the ridge where the city lights flicker like an old memory. I stood there a long time, jacket zipped up to my chin, wind clawing at my sleeves, and thought about the word deserve. What did they deserve? What did I? I remember being 12 years old, hiding a bruised knee and a report card with straight A's, waiting for someone to say good job, and getting nothing but silence because Eric had flunked math and needed all the attention. I remembered watching them beam at him after he crashed their second car, and they paid for the repairs. Like he was a puppy who chewed a shoe instead of a grown man wrecking his life. And I remember the night they tried to make me the villain. They hadn't just let it happen. They made it happen. So no, I didn't know them a thing. There's a strange sort of peace that comes when you finally stop waiting for the apology that will never come. After that night on the ridge, something in me settled. Not healed. I don't know if that part ever fully heals, but settled like a bruise that stops aching even though the skin remembers. I started sleeping better, eating better, laughing, even though always with a bit of distance. Like I didn't quite trust joy anymore, but I was willing to let it sit near me. I stopped checking my phone for their calls. Stopped replaying every conversation in my head, looking for a crack I might have missed. Stopped carrying the guilt they never asked me to hold, but always expected me to. One evening, I got a postcard in the mail. No name on it. Just a picture of Lake Tahoe and a short note scribbled on the back. Hope you're doing okay. Thinking of you. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the handwriting with my thumb. It was Eric's. And for a flicker of a second, I felt something old try to stir, some reflex born of too many second chances. But I didn't reach for it. I put the postcard in a drawer with the rest of the things I didn't need, but wasn't quite ready to throw away. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just acknowledgement. That chapter was over. I'd stopped hoping they'd become different people. Now I was becoming one. Sometimes people assume that moving on looks like a new relationship or a new car or some glowing social media post about healing. That wasn't how it looked for me. For me, it was taking the long way home from the grocery store, drinking coffee without flinching when my phone buzzed, fixing a warped guitar neck with my hand steady, not clenched. It was in the quiet. But the thing about quiet is it gives you time to remember. And memories, they sneak up on you. Like the way my dad used to leave a lamp on in the hallway when I was little, said it was so I wouldn't trip if I got up at night. I used to think that was love. Turns out it was probably just habit. A lot of the things I thought were love ended up being maintenance. There's one memory I can't shake. I was 19. Eric had just wrecked his first car, a used Camry our parents gave him when he got his license. He'd been drinking. Not legally, not responsibly. He hit a mailbox and scraped the side of a neighbor's van. My parents made me go with him to apologize. Said I'd be the one they'd listen to. Said people liked me more when I talked. I remember standing there on that stranger's porch, explaining how we were sorry, how we would pay for the damages, while Eric stood behind me with his hands in his hoodie pocket, not saying a word. He didn't even make eye contact, just nodded at the floor like the consequences didn't belong to him. That's what it had always been. I was the spokesperson for other people's disasters. It wasn't just about the money or the car or even the will. It was that they trained me to see love as service, and when I stopped serving, they stopped seeing me. And that broke something. In February, The co-op hosted an open mic night. Bunch of high schoolers performing their half-written songs, shaky hands on borrowed guitars. I stood in the back, watching. At one point, Diego, the quiet kid, stepped up. He looked at me before he started, like he needed permission to take up space. He played 2 chords. Stopped. Tried again. Messed up. Everyone started to shift in their seats. So I walked up and sat beside him. Didn't say anything. Just adjusted the strap on his shoulder, whispered something about tempo, then stepped back. He played the whole song. It was rough, beautiful, real. When he finished, the room clapped in that gentle way people do when they know how much it costs to try. He looked at me afterward like he wasn't sure what to feel. I told him he did good. That was it. And I meant it. On the way home that night, I thought about how long it took me to believe that my mistakes didn't make me disposable. It's a long road, this thing we call healing. Mostly uphill. Sometimes you walk it alone. But every once in a while, someone walks beside you. Just for a few steps. Just long enough to remind you that you're still here. Still choosing. Still enough. Spring came to Flagstaff slow and cautious. Like it didn't quite trust the ground beneath it. I understood that feeling. After everything, blooming felt risky. But things grew anyway. I kept my head down. Fixed guitars. Took long walks. Made small talk at the co-op. Let people in a little at a time. Not because I trusted them. Not yet. But because I finally understood I didn't need to vanish to protect myself. I just needed boundaries. And peace. And the nerve to say no before resentment curdled into obligation. One Sunday afternoon, I got a knock on my workshop door. I opened it to find Diego holding a beat-up amp and a paper bag of screws. He asked if I had time to show him how to fix the input jack. I said sure, motioned him in. We worked quietly, side by side. He asked questions. I gave answers. At some point, he looked up and said, "Do your parents know where you are?" I paused. Not because it hurt, because I hadn't thought about them in weeks. I told him the truth. That they probably knew I was alive, but not much else. That I hadn't spoken to them in nearly a year. He nodded like he understood more than he was saying. Then said something I still think about sometimes. That's kind of cool. Not being where they left you. I didn't say anything back, but I felt it. Deep in my chest, like someone cracked open a part of me I didn't know was locked. Because he was right. They left me in one place. Obedient, reliable, invisible. But I wasn't there anymore. I built something new. Not grand, not impressive. But mine. And that was enough. Later that night, I sat on my porch as the wind moved through the pine trees, carrying the scent of damp bark and cold stone. I held a cup of tea in both hands and thought about how grief doesn't always come from losing people. Sometimes, it comes from realizing they were never who you hoped they'd be. It's a quieter grief. Slower, but it stays. And the only way through it is forward. A year to the day after everything went down, the fake insurance claim, the charges, the voicemail from my mother, I went back to Reno. Not for them. For me. I told no one I was coming. Just booked a cheap motel off Virginia Street. Brought a bag with 2 shirts and my old repair kit. I walked around my old neighborhood, past the house I used to help maintain, the one with the cracked foundation and the perfectly trimmed hedges. It looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter, too. Like whatever story it once tried to tell had already ended, and the last few pages were blank. The windows were dark. A for sale sign crooked on the lawn, half buried in wind-blown leaves. I stood across the street for a while, hands in my jacket, just staring. Not sad, not angry, just done. Later that evening, I drove out to the desert edge, where the city gives way to dust and silence. I parked, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cooling dusk. In the trunk, under an old blanket, was the bat. The same one Eric used to try to erase me. I hadn't touched it since I moved. But something told me I needed to bring it here, not to keep it, but to leave it behind. I walked until the lights of Reno disappeared behind me, until it was just dirt and stars and the long, empty kind of quiet that doesn't ask anything of you. Then I dug a hole with my hands, just deep enough. Dropped the bat in. Didn't say anything. Didn't make it a ritual. Just covered it back up. Stood there for a moment, and then walked away. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless. There's no great moral here. No need about to tie it all up. Families fall apart. People choose favorites. Some hurts get stitched, some don't. Life isn't clean, and healing sure as hell isn't graceful. But I'll tell you what I do know. Sometimes survival doesn't look like triumph. It looks like a quiet room, a finished song, a warm cup of tea on a cold porch. It looks like letting go of things that were never yours to carry in the first place. It looks like choosing yourself, not once, but every day after.